I would do it.
All right, we are on.
Discussions or,
Do we have a minute? Yeah. All right, I'd like to call the committee of the whole to order at
6:37.
6:37. And this has been publicly noticed,
The meeting has been posted and noticed according to law.
and all trustees are present except for President Rozek, who has been detained in the Atlanta, oh, not in a legal way, just so she got called up traveling.
Extenuating circumstances have kept her from here.
So our item for consideration is the standing committee distribution of tasks and discuss next steps for the volunteer committee. So in our packet we have a really thorough memo that tells us how we got here today, and based on our last discussion, it looks like there was one change made to the grouping so that budget and finance and public works won't be in the same grouping, so that seems like that addresses the workload. Where's that?
Where is that?
Let's see. No. In the first, standing committees. Oh, you know what?
What?
It's not in the memo, it is in the body of the policy.
Okay.
So, just going through the memo, we have the standing committee and committee of the whole structure policy. It basically says that we, updates were made based on our comments from the last meeting. And then, so we can go through that. And then we're also being asked to, just to review the next steps, not to review, but we're getting updated in this memo about the next steps for contemplating approaching the village board prioritization process, which will be different this year based also on feedback, and then also what's the next step for volunteer committees. So why don't we take the policy changes first?
I have some concerns about the volunteer committee, so I don't know. I don't have an opinion on when to discuss, but I would like to discuss.
Great. Why don't we take, we have less than an hour, we have 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we take, 10, 15 to go over the policy, and if we need more time, we'll take more time, but we'll make sure we get, I would like to take them one at a time though.
Yeah, no.
Great. So could we review the policy first?
Yeah.
And I'll ask staff, Tyler, is there anything, and Rebecca, is there anything you want to call out to us right away?
It's pretty similar to last time.
Yeah.
I think we just wanted you all to take, maybe a good, most of your 15 minutes to look over the last page of the policy, which we didn't really get to, which is kind of the division of the workload, and just to get your comments on
I
that.
have some comments on the policy.
Could we, but we did, first I want to get a read from the group. There was a change made in the groupings of the standing committees. Right.
Yeah, that hasn't changed since we initially proposed it.
Oh, it hasn't changed.
Right, but if you
what
wanted,
we
if you wanted to,
the group wanted to change it, that there was.
yeah, if you
concern
want
about
to change that, you're
Got
more
it.
than able to, correct.
All right,
Didn't you just I'm a little confused. I thought
Yes.
Public Works and Finance and Budget, I thought were always together. Were they together from the beginning?
Previously,
Okay.
right.
Then this one.
So, no, so in the, historically, they were together, right? Why don't I hand this over to staff, because I'm
Yeah,
not doing it any
Do
favors.
you want me to start or you want
Yeah, I
to
don't
start?
know the history on whether they're together or not,
No,
but you
I
can
don't
go.
either.
And then,
Well, depending on the president, the president would always decide which three are paired together. And that would always slightly change. When President Rozek made the recommendation, or the appointments, when you were all appointed to your recent ones, it does not match up to these. I think when initially I put the policy together, I was trying to find a combo of 3 and 3 with a workload that would be comparable to one another. Cause right now, in past historically, Public Works and Budget and Finance have been the two busiest committees, and right now they're together, so we were trying to at least separate those out. But,
And JPL would be like the third busiest.
yeah,
depending
and
on
right now they're
size.
all together, so we were just trying to separate those out a little bit, but up to you as a board on how you want to.
So that's
go
right,
about
so
that.
the way that President Rosick made the appointments, it would, and grouped the members on the committees, it would put the three busiest committees together, which
Right.
means your agendas,
Yeah.
your meeting times would just
Right.
expand.
I mean, and the only reason I question is, it seems like Public Works and Budget and Finance kind of go together.
Right.
It's such a large expenditure,
Mhm.
so to have them together made sense to
Yeah.
me, but I do understand the workload considerations.
Work for it, yeah.
I mean, I don't mind
Yeah,
personally, because I'm
fine with how
not
you originally did it.
on those
they
committees,
are.
and then that would open it up to participation, you know, we could attend more easily.
I mean, I think the question is, is that something we want the village president to decide, or do we wanna set something in stone here, you know? And, because I think it is a decision also about personalities and, you know, there's other things that
Right.
factor into it, so and I mean, frankly, it's nice to kind of switch around, every year and, you know, be working with a
Right.
different group, and,
Yeah.
so I'm hesitant to, put something in the policy because, you know, it's kind of locks us in.
I agree too.
And I would,
Last discussion.
I would also, also the other thing that I would add, you know, historical experience. Trustee Amenta, for instance, was DPW chair for, you know,
2 years.
2 years. So having that historical experience kind of in those meetings would help out as well, so it might kind of line up that way too. So,
Mhm. Well, that's based on the current board, you know,
Yeah, I
that
mean,
doesn't
right.
necessarily,
Mhm.
and there can always be collaboration, I mean, the fact is that we all have experience that we should share with each other, so I don't think we have to be limited. But I don't have, I think it was more of a staff concern, right? Was it, did you, from a staff
I only did
perspective?
because I thought we would wanna have them as even as possible, but that doesn't mean that it's the best, you know, there's so many different factors, I completely understand where it's at.
Depending on the people's expertise of
Yeah,
the
let's-
current
Yeah.
board and stuff.
Great, so I guess that is the main issue, so what we wanna do is take out the groupings
Yes.
and say that it'll be by president.
The president will decide now.
Yep.
Okay.
Next paragraph, we had talked about, the third line from the bottom, the village president working with the village will be given authority to place it on the item on the standing committee that she feels, or he feels is most appropriate. I think we added, unless board assigns to it to a specific committee. I thought we had a fairly lengthy discussion on this is what democracy looks like, so.
I wanted to add to the second sentence, the village president, I wanted to add, as the representative of the board, will work with the village manager. And I was thinking also that decision, if it hasn't been discussed in the board, when we do it as a future, if the board hasn't taken action at prior board meeting to say what committee, that I think I would like to add in language about that the president or manager will consult with committee chairs. You know, I don't think it's that outlandish to, you know, just contact someone and say, you know, because I think a lot of times, like someone could say, Jessica was really interested in this, and I would say, well, that's the longer habit. You know what I mean? I just,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
So I would like to have consultation with the chairs included in there.
That's reasonable.
Is that, do I need to be taking notes on these, or you're grabbing them?
Well, I'm making, yeah, I got notes on that.
Me too. We'll compare.
Okay, great.
To trustee
Oh, yeah.
Maher's point, we do have later in the policy,
Right.
that hits that point that we're encouraging board members, when you're in the board meeting for a future agenda item, that you include in the motion what standing committee it would go
right.
to. So that's covered. I think I just need to make a little comment that says, after is most appropriate, something as far as if not already determined by
Mhm.
the board or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah, okay.
So I can certainly do
And
that.
because 80% or 90% of what's on the agenda doesn't come from us, it comes from you. So, but like I said, I'd like to add consultation.
Okay.
I also, on the next paragraph, I had this, communicating with the staff liaison, that, I feel like that should be the village manager. I mean, whenever I send an email to someone on staff, and I believe that's in our communication policy, that we're supposed to CC the village manager, and I just feel like it would be better to be centralized with us communicating with the village manager about issues, rather than me talking to Mark, and you talking to Sarah, and you talking to the chief, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right.
What?
Well,
No,
just
that's
trying to
not
find
whatever.
where you're going.
Under the role of village trustees.
Yeah, I got it.
Or it says the village trustee should communicate to staff liaison to set the meeting agenda.
So can I ask a quick question? I just raise, so so the way we're doing this is that the board is recommending where an initiative goes, and if the board doesn't make that recommendation, then the village president, in consultation with the standing committee, will make the recommendation.
And
With
the
the-
village manager.
With the village manager.
Are we, and we're good, I mean, is there any way to, do you wanna try to consolidate that, or does everyone, is more of a everyone want, I mean, do we always wanna discuss at the board level where an initiative goes, or do we more want a consultation and then assignment by the president? Maybe I'm not
I think,
wording it eloquently.
I don't think, some stuff will go just straight to the agenda or committee, because it comes from staff, because it's operational
Okay.
in nature.
But to the full board, are you talking about the?
I'm just,
Sorry, the full board agenda, sorry, because that was sort of one of my questions was, is there a way, like, can the committee decide what is relevant for them to discuss?
I get what your question is, I
Is
think.
that what you're saying?
Because we're talking, so staff things generally will flow to the natural committee, and it sounds like here they're gonna just at least alert the chair. And I think, my understanding is we wanna give staff the ability to determine where staff-driven initiatives go. But things that we initiate, on the other hand, for example, the decriminalization of marijuana, I wanted to take that on, right? And that is more of where it would be necessary to have the consultation. So one of the things we want to avoid as a body is to micromanage the staff and all of their operations. We have a very competent, leaders at the helm here. So as much as we can get out of their way and allow them to do their job, we should. So they should not be consulting us about every action item to be put on a committee. That's my opinion, and that's, I haven't had problems in the past. I know that we're moving forward, and if we do have problems, then maybe we take another look at the policy. But I don't want us to be in any more position of micromanaging more than we already do, which is a
I
tremendous
think
amount.
maybe we are saying two different, I think because I have a different question than that.
Okay.
Is that,
That's
I
sorry.
think I was just wondering what the board's level of comfort was with, when there's instead of having, so right now we're gonna discuss at the board level, and then somebody makes a motion and assigns it to a committee.
For future items.
For future items, is that something where we feel it'd be more efficient if we said, we'll say that it's more of a instead of in the motion, it's a consult and then the president assigns? I'm just trying to think in terms of efficiency.
No.
Rather
like
than
in the
us,
motion,
rather than
yeah.
us making a motion and vote, yeah.
I'm just wondering, yeah.
Mm.
No,
I'm okay with having both ways of doing it.
And I'm just raising it, this is not like a stop in the tracks type issue for me, but I'm just trying to make it,
Simpler.
yeah.
Right.
Well, it could be
Yeah,
that
sorry.
the motion is that the president will decide.
Mhm.
But I think if at that time, we can resolve it and direct it
Right.
all in one
Mhm.
motion within the context of future items, the agenda item, then I think that's good, that's very efficient to do.
I would also like the opportunity to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I just want to let you know that I think it's important, like, again, not because I want to micromanage any type of the process, but I just want to have a clear understanding of that, so that it's efficient.
Mhm.
Okay,
And that would be in the context of a board meeting or
right.
if it's assigned. So that's why I don't think we need to put language that at any time the president would decide. It'll always be in collaboration and consultation. I think that's what that's my
Mhm.
prerogative, and so I don't, are you trying to propose something else?
No, that's what I would prefer.
Okay.
Is that it is, that it's discussed with the whole board, that we have that opportunity to have that conversation.
So is the language the way, so trustee Warren, it sounds like, were you looking for something different or is that your preference?
Potentially, I guess what I was trying to think was, would it be more efficient if we didn't have that bigger conversation at the board level and just had a consultation and then the president assigned? But it doesn't sound like that's the will of the board either.
Exactly,
So I'm,
yes.
yeah, so
Yeah, efficiency and will of the board are two different things.
Answer is probably yes, or maybe not, then it would be more staff time.
We'll just
Hours.
we'll take a Steve.
Yeah, okay.
So is the language the way it is allow that what the will of the board is reflected in the language that is agreed to stand? Or was somebody feeling like there was something missing?
I have a question about the previous thing, and I'm sorry, trustee Amanda had mentioned a change in here.
Which paragraph are you in?
I believe it was the role of the, which one was it, the trustee, but anyway, I'll bring it up later, I'll find it.
Okay.
So so I had suggested, this thing about, should we communicate with our staff liaison or should we communicate with the village manager on the committee agendas?
Right.
Oh, that's what it was.
I mean, I don't know, I mean, my feeling is that it's more appropriate the village manager, but I don't know, I don't feel hugely strongly about it.
I agree with
I
trustee
like that,
Benson.
I like what you said.
It can start with
centralization.
village manager and then the village managers could say, that would be great to follow up with the
Yeah.
staff liaison. We're all on the same page and then you'd have that.
But I just think our communication policy is pretty clear about lines of communication.
Right,
And
it was
you know,
all-
so, because I think if I'm talking to Mark and Rebecca, I mean, I CC Rebecca every time I talk to somebody, but, most of the time, but, if I'm talking to Mark about something, she may not be tuned in, and she is the one really responsible for putting the agenda together.
Right.
So,
It's just easy to stay up to speed
So you would,
in real time.
so we could add that.
Well, I like your suggestion of, like if you want to start with me and then, if it moves to a staff member, great. But at least then I'm understanding the process, because that week
Right.
goes really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just trying to track where you are in the process.
So that sentence should say the village
Village
district should
manager.
communicate with the village
Mhm.
manager instead of staff liaison.
Great.
Okay.
We skipped over this, I'm sorry I didn't bring this up, role of the village president for standing committees. And it said that, I'm fine with the thought here, it's the appointment of 3 committees and appointed chair to each standing committee at the first meeting following the spring election and is needed during the year. I thought we discussed last time that there is a meeting following the spring election with the former, it's not the first meeting, it's the second.
Yes, it's the statute.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks.
All right.
Hey Tyler, not to be a total pain in the butt lawyer, but the last, role of village president for standing committees, the last sentence there, we're missing a couple of words in there. The village president may attend and participate in the discussion, but not as a voting member of any standing committee, I think it should be. So I think we just want to wordsmith that sentence before we go final on this.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I don't mind that at all.
I know.
It's
Well,
very welcome.
There's a lot of words here. Okay, next section is role of village manager for standing committees. I just have 2 typo word things, which I can just email you, but, prioritizing, and then on the next level, it's line from the bottom, the 3rd from the bottom, and the 4th from the bottom. I have little things that I can just show you.
Okay.
I don't have to discuss.
Okay.
All right, is there any content, or intent that people would like to?
My only question is if we are changing, or is this where you were saying that the village trustees should communicate with the staff liaison and the village manager? Is that what you were, is that exact sentence? Or
No, I was taking it out of the paragraph before, but,
if that's the communication policy, shouldn't that be in that there as well?
the
Oh, to
village
know,
will just,
liaison to know.
update the state committee chairperson and liaison know the topics to be taken on review the
So-
agenda. Staff liaison, we'll work with committee chair. Yeah, I mean, my feeling about this one also was that I would, rather than the decision being made by the village manager and the village president, if there's too many items for an agenda, that there should be consultation with the chair of that committee as to, what items need to be scheduled.
Mhm.
I would just like to see consultation with the chair in there.
Okay, so village manager will work with the village president, in consultation with
Yeah.
the committee chair,
Mm-hmm.
Staff, is that?
I think for right now that should work.
Mhm.
You know, like, so we're starting the the department heads know, like, I was concerned about our schedule coming up in March. So I was like, I need everyone to front load what they have just from these 2 meetings to see where we're gonna have time available. So once I assess that in accordance with what we're doing with this, then I'm gonna start to reshift based upon what needs for business purposes to come first and then slot in from there. For me, you just should always know that my job is the business first. So because we gotta keep moving on logistically getting projects done. So once those slot in, then I go back and take a look at the rest to see what's time sensitive. And I know, like, for, Trustee McKay and Trustee Backhorst, like, I'll tend to reach out further in advance, like, here's what I forecast coming, or this meeting's not working out, but you can anticipate that we're gonna try to slot it here so that there's a level of communication whenever possible. Just because just a matter of form, I usually wanna communicate on it early because I don't wanna forget. Right? There's too many different, balls in the air, so that's what you can expect from me, and then if I run into an issue, I'll let you know. And hopefully, have some suggested solution how we can move forward. Do you guys have anything?
So it sounds like adding that phrase does not create any kind of undue burden, or it's really reflective of what everybody wants anyway.
I think we can get rid of the last 2 sentences though, because if there's consultation with the chair, then there's no need for the village manager to update the chair.
Right.
Or the staff liaison to, I think that'll be done in consultation with the. So I would say delete the last 2 sentences.
This is 2 different ways of saying, getting at the same thing, the same kind of process.
But if there's consultation, so if there's too much on an agenda and something has to be cut for the near term, and there's consultation with the chair, like, okay, we'll just, and so there's some kind of consultative discussion, then there's no need for an updating of the committee chair because the committee chair's been involved, and then the staff liaison and committee chair don't need to prioritize. I don't understand that sentence anyway, because I'm not sure who's, I guess what I'm saying is the decision should be made, the village manager, village president, in consultation with the chair. And we'd already talked about the staff liaison is probably would cause confusion, so like the last 2 sentences, and then the very last one, I think we already discussed, should go. And I'm saying the one before that isn't necessary because the chair will already have been in the discussion, so.
Does anybody have concerns about that proposal? To eliminate those 2 sentences?
I think, it seems, it makes sense.
Trustee Mark?
Is it somewhere, is it stated otherwise? It's redundant, but in some ways redundant isn't. they,
We're gonna add it in the sentence, but if the amount of agenda items presented is too large in length, the village manager will work with the village president in consultation with the chair to reduce the number of items
Okay.
and prioritize the discussions. So there's no need to update because
That's
you as a
good.
chair will have already been involved.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we got
got
everybody
it.
on the same page.
Jeez,
Okay,
that's
all right, so we
Kind of a
Great.
flow chart on this.
Yeah.
No, sometimes you do need a flow chart.
Well, we've already got past our 15 minutes, but I'm not
Oh.
gonna stop us from
No,
going through the
no,
policy,
no,
obviously,
no,
so
no.
we just wanna save
Is there,
time.
oh, is there something else on the agenda besides this?
No, there's just more on the memo that you wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
So, meeting times,
The only comment I had on that is that, and I did ask Tyler to attach the, ordinance, is that if any two of us wanna call a special meeting, we have the authority to do that. It hasn't been used very often, but, the way this is written, that if you wanted to call a special meeting, you're required to coordinate with staff liaison on staff meeting day to ensure availability of staff in compliance with open meetings law. Well, I mean, I would assume we're complying with open meetings law, but I guess that's limiting our ability to call a special meeting, so I'm not in favor of that, but I just want to point that out.
I think that it should be, you're right, it should be something noted unless it's a special meeting called under one of the
Statute,
section, yeah.
ordinance.
That it's clear in here that we haven't gotten rid of that.
yeah, we referenced.
I mean, I just think that there may be a time at some point in the future where there's something important that people want a special meeting about it.
And out of courtesy, we would always coordinate with staff to make sure that we have the support that we need in compliance. That would be the intent, but it is nice to acknowledge that.
Well, yeah, there's a whole procedure in the ordinance about notifying other people, other trustees of the meeting, and I assume it's public notice. I mean, the clerk is talked about in the ordinance as to what the clerk needs to do.
Good
So-
notice.
Would it solve it to soften the sentence up, like the chair will use best efforts to coordinate with staff? I mean, is
So
that?
that would be fine, yeah.
I just included that so staff could help post
Right.
and any material.
It's not
so,
to be obstructive, it's
right.
to be
It's to try.
facilitated.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like, we'll make best efforts.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
that we're not held to it.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And
I
then,
like that.
does that part of the ordinance, does it make sense to acknowledge that in that sentence then?
And
I don't know
We
if
need
it's
to open
needed,
Okay.
but if you want to make a reference to it, I would be happy to.
you mean, are we talking about the open meetings thing?
Not open meetings
Special
law,
meetings.
but the
Special
special
meetings.
meetings.
Oh.
Pages.
Where'd they go?
Yeah, where to go? I guess the one issue that I would have with that is that, are these special meetings, can items be considered at these meetings, or are these for discussion only? Because if it's for consideration, the last thing you would wanna do is set up a situation where you have people jockeying for when they can meet on the offshoot. You know, that's why we do have a very regular schedule that we're all allowed to plan for. Some of us work full-time and have other obligations, so, you know, we can count on this work schedule. So if there are willy-nilly, you know, I'm not saying this would happen, but hypothetically it could, special meetings on this night or this night, that can be difficult for those of us who aren't, you know.
We can't take action unless there's a quorum,
Yeah, you
so.
can't.
Right, but you still could take action.
So your concern is it could be used politically,
Or it's just, we
but
do
it's in the
it.
ordinance,
Yeah,
so
okay, that's fine.
if that is the will of somebody, they can do that.
Yeah,
Well, no,
I just don't wanna
would
make it
be
even
confusing.
easier to do. I'm not saying that we can't have special meetings, of course, and we've had them before, we'll have them again. But part of having special meetings is generally, you know, we wanna prohibit the case where you can have them on days that don't fit certain people's schedules, et cetera. And that's one of the nice things about, you know, boards that work well together, is that we don't try to intentionally exclude anyone from those, but we can't speak for future boards.
But I mean, I'm not sure if the ordinance says one thing and there's a policy that says something else. Like
Yeah.
what would, I mean, I assume the ordinance would still.
Oh, yeah, that supersedes, but.
Yeah, so I mean, at minimum, we should have the policy be consistent with the ordinance.
And this is the committees and the committee of the whole. This is board meetings.
That's the ordinance, or?
Oh, this is a special board meeting for the board. This is the committee meetings.
All right, well, I don't wanna hold up the whole discussion over that.
Okay, well, we're satisfied
That's
with best
true,
efforts.
that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
So committee, yeah, committee is
committees.
different,
for
yeah.
the-
Okay,
That's a good point.
Great, thank you. Good resolution. All right, staff liaisons for the standing committees. That looks like there's no change. Agenda topics for discussion and consideration.
I just had a question on the, let's see, well, now it would be the third and fourth, or no, the second and third to last sentences. So no agenda items discussed at the standing committee should be later considered that night for the full board. However, well, I know, then you have to read the next sentence.
Yes.
yeah, it's confusing.
It's
the way
confusing
written.
because it says no agenda items, and now it doesn't say with the exception, well, it says the
Yeah.
one-time consideration and a vote will be taken during a standing committee meeting if a standing committee has finalized an initiative or agenda item and wishes for it to be deliberated and voted upon by the full board.
But that would mean it'd be on the next agenda though, right?
Correct.
Not on that.
So what I was trying to say for that is during your meetings, your standing committees, you always have discussion. One time we would add consideration is if you're wanting to make a recommendation to move an item to the full board. But it's still, that means that item would be on a future,
Okay, and I get
Agenda.
that, but one thing I would hate to do is if we discuss something in committee that requires action, that we are not locked into waiting until the next,
Yeah, sure.
even, and, you know, it could be the fifth time we've discussed something, and according to this, we don't have the ability to make decision that night. So the B ordinance, for example, took us 9 months, right? I mean, I guess we could have waited another meeting, but still.
But I think we addressed that in terms of, items that are time sensitive would go to full board.
correct.
But this precludes us from discussing it in committee
Committee,
that
it
night.
depends
I don't wanna, if we need to have a little bit more discussion,
Yeah.
we should still have that ability. It shouldn't preclude us from
Yeah.
that.
So what would be the solution?
Well,
Well, what's the reasoning for not having something on the committee? I mean, we used to do that, we used to
Yeah.
have committee and full board.
I'll tell you, I originally put it in there because there was a few different times when there was changes in the committee, and then it was voted on to take it to the full board, and then you would have the board that I think was a little frustrated because they hadn't seen the changes yet, and then they were being asked to make decisions on that night. And they wanted to be able to review the changes that were made.
well, that's
in the
fair. They
standing
could ask
committee.
for it to be kicked back. I mean, I get what you're saying, but but I'm also, I have issue with this other sentence here too. And I'm sorry, I'm not saying that that's not a wrong thing. I get what you're doing here. The committee the second part, the one-time consideration of what will be taken during a standing committee meeting if the standing committee has finalized an initiative or agenda item and wishes it for it to be deliberated and voted upon. What if, I mean, how does a standing committee determine, like, you can kill it in
Yeah.
committee by saying, we're not ready.
So I actually asked Nathan,
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
No, please. I wanna know.
I asked Nathan this question, and he referred me to a code section that we have under referral to committee. You know, any proposed ordinance, resolution, or any other action may be taken to the committee for review or recommendation. Such proposal may be recommitted at any time prior to its final consideration. So the short answer is that no, nothing can actually kind of die in committee. The board, you know, if it refers something to a standing committee, and if the full board doesn't believe that it's been like a reasonable amount of time, they can bring that item back on its own initiative or on the board's own initiative and act on something. If they want to. You know, typically when we send things to standing committees because we wanted to get vetted or some additional work done on it, like the B. You know, the board, you know, didn't want to spend the 9 months, you know, working. But when it was ready, then, you know, but if someone if the board in its full complement said, you know, we really want to do this sooner. You know, we want to have it done in 3 months. They could have, you know, brought it back up to the board if they had so desired.
And how would they do that?
By making the request, you know, based upon our current policy, we could also have that discussion. You know, it would make sense under future items of consideration, because right then, I mean, it just makes sense that we're using that section to refer something.
But that's kind of circular.
That's a future item, and it's not a future item. I mean, it's a I don't think under Robert's rules, it's like if something's been brought to the meeting body and sent to a committee, there has to be some mechanism for getting it back. I don't think items for future consideration doesn't make sense to me.
Well, here's another example. Let's say we discuss TIF policy, and there are some people that don't want the policy to go forward to the full board, or and we're not ready, you know?
Yeah.
Or well, let's just take something that would come from you guys. Let's say you guys have some contracts, or I don't know, some big contracts, and we're stalling,
Mhm.
maybe for good reasons, maybe for otherwise, but,
Okay.
how would we get it off of our committee then to the full board?
You know what, he doesn't address that in his response to me, but I'd be happy to ask him.
Okay.
So I can follow up and get back to you.
So is there any ordinance that says that, to trustee Bachor's point, precludes us from having something in committee on the same night as we schedule it for full board possible consideration?
I don't know of any ordinance.
No, I don't know of any ordinance either.
So is it the will of the board to have that option in this, that there may be, in general, often, things in committee are for discussion only. But if it's the will of the chair, president, well, I don't know what the language would be, but then there may be a time when it's scheduled for discussion in committee and possible consideration at the board.
Right, and like if the committee hasn't if there's
Yeah.
still some issues the committee wants to talk about, but it's time to
Mhm.
talk about, I mean, I don't see a reason for them to do both.
Yeah.
It's a green line.
I mean, maybe our general practice is not to, but
Right.
let's not say
Right.
no.
Right, like if it's the second time we're discussing something and we wanna vote on it that night, we certainly don't wanna prevent it from voting on it that night.
Yeah.
Or third
But
time,
it would
fifth.
need to be agenda in advance.
Right, so we're getting close on the Bs,
Yeah.
B part 2 here.
Let's schedule it for possible
Let's say, you know, we're gonna
consideration.
probably wrap it up, can you put it on the agenda for discussion and
Please.
possible consideration? Maybe we aren't ready to bring it to the
Exactly.
full board and we say,
So I can just remove that language, because
Excellent.
then there's nothing in the policy that would preclude us from doing that.
okay.
Excellent. So then we have the topic, thank you, trustee Elton.
Yeah.
We have the topic.
I have a question on the topic list, first item. I know we discussed this before, and there was, I don't want to, okay, so we discussed the removal of interviews of volunteer committee appointments. I think that interviews, especially if we are making decisions based on, you know, attendance and other kind of things, that we should definitely have interviews. I think anyone who is interviewing, who is promising their time and resources to serve on one of our volunteer committees is able to go through the rigor of our interviews, which aren't that rigorous. And if they're not, they probably won't be able to go through the rigor of the reprimanding or anything that would happen if they don't fulfill their duties as a committee member. So I would want to make sure that people understand clearly what their duties and, you know, what the considerations are. Going through an interview, I'm pretty sure, you know, if, I'm not worried about rejection. If someone doesn't get on, I think that they're, you know, probably adults and can, you know, have gone through stuff before. So I don't know why we would get rid of the interview process. I think it's good for anyone to be able to ask questions.
They are really time consuming.
If needed, so it
Yeah.
doesn't have to, I mean, it provides the option.
And make sure we, if needed, that way, if we don't feel like we need an interview, we don't have to.
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, because sometimes we don't,
Oh, yeah.
have many applicants, so.
Right, I
So
mean,
there
it's really
was-
you're one.
I will say there were definitely times we interviewed people and we all kind of said, I don't think so. So it's not like it was totally worthless. There were times that it was valuable, but it is really time consuming, and if there's a more efficient way to do it, you know, for that too.
Right.
So what are we changing then?
Just get rid of the redlining.
Oh,
Well, the reason why we got rid of that was not to make a statement as far as to eliminate interviews, it was more to encompass more on that item. So because you may be talking about appointments, not just interviews, just general, maybe you wanna, as a three, deliberate amongst different candidates.
This doesn't prescribe a process, it prescribes a topic, and that acknowledging that the time that it takes is often best handled by a special meeting.
Could
So,
you move after appointments, have including interviews if needed, so we'll have volunteer committee appointments, including interviews if needed.
I can add
So
that.
it's the interviews, it's not limited to interviews.
My notes on this subject are, and this is just, my proposal, that we generally start with issues in committee, and that our full board agendas are things that have already been discussed or vetted, so that when something's at the board, we're not having long, involved, detailed discussions, like we're kind of just moving through, because we're already basically, at least three of us are in agreement. I'm not sure how to change this. Maybe the paragraph agenda items formulated by village staff may be taken directly to full village board for consideration, or should, I don't want to put something like it absolutely has to be a certain way, because I think we need to be flexible, but a first step for agenda items formulated by village staff should be to standing committees, although there may be times when an item needs to go directly to committee of the whole or full board.
Is there a paragraph that you're referencing here? I'm sorry.
Right, this one,
Above
topic,
it?
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That's my feeling about how committees, but I don't know.
That's sort of my understanding of the purpose of committees, is that the beekeeping details can all be hashed
Yeah.
out and then presented to the board, and the board can, sign off on it or send it back to, hash out some more details. So that, to me, I think that's like the biggest benefit of the committee structure, that we can get all that, and then be more efficient and get more done at the board level.
So how does that, I'm sorry, because I stepped out of it, so how does it change what we currently have here? Maybe I just
But-
missed that
Is it the
portion.
language?
So,
Yeah,
Or
I
the
think it's
actual
some of
list?
what did
No,
I
I think it's
say?
just some of the language in that paragraph above the topics.
A first step for agenda items formulated by village staff should be standing committees. Is committee of the whole considered a standing committee, or no, it's a committee, right? Or is it standing committees, committee of the whole, full village board, they're all, or is
Three
committee of the whole a standing committee?
I'd say they're three different.
Oh, no.
That's very interesting.
That's my opinion.
So I would say a first stop for agenda items formulated by village staff should be either a standing committee or committee of the whole. So I guess I'm trying to discourage things going directly to village board that are not gonna just go, that are gonna, because I think we all would like to have, not have hour-long discussions at village,
At the what?
at the board.
Yeah.
So can I do a quick example,
Yep.
just so
Sure.
I am
Yep.
clear, because I'm not clear right now. So like, a future agenda item is gonna probably be the Atwater Beach lifeguard contract, okay? So for that, that's, we only had one proposal, and that's gonna be probably somewhat similar, constructed based on what we did last year. So under service agreement award of contract, I would, probably say that's no significant changes, which right now that would just go directly to village board. So am I hearing a contrary opinion to that should still go to one of the standing committees first to review prior to going to the board?
I think it depends, are there changes or aren't there changes? Is it the same amount? Is there, if it really is essentially the same thing, I would say, yeah, that doesn't need to go to a committee, but.
Okay.
And that's how this is structured.
That's how,
So
right.
we have a brand new RFP that we've never done before. I'll give you an example. The financial services advisory. From my understanding, we've never done an RFP for it. It's a new one that we're gonna do. My intention, based upon how this is written, is that I'm gonna take it to budget and finance before it actually goes to the board. However, let's say we have general engineering come back, right? We've already done this RFP, we have the template. If there are no substantial changes, we would do that process and go to the board.
Yeah.
Because in the past, yes,
Maybe just, I think maybe it's just the language, because when you go through the list, it totally makes sense. So maybe it's just the language at the top.
Oh, yeah. and
Not
that's the-
to tell you where it has to go, because again, when you look at the list, it really does make sense, and it's,
Right.
and the list is pretty reflective of what we've talked about in the past and
Right.
any
Yeah.
recommendations that we've made, so we wouldn't wanna redo that. I think that maybe it's just saying in the paragraph that agenda items that are new or significantly different from past initiatives will be most likely directed to standing committees.
That works.
Okay, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's great.
That's good. That's great
Whereas,
clarification.
items that are not significantly different than
Yeah.
previous action taken may go to the full board.
Then I would add, as outlined below, so we tie it to these.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then maybe something about, because then in previous paragraphs, it talks about how this will all happen in consultation with the president, village manager, and committee chair. So we've already established that that consultation is gonna happen. This is just talking about the actual topics and kind of anticipating, so that we're not reinventing the wheel every single time something comes up. But it doesn't preclude us from reinventing the wheel if we want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can wordsmith that a little bit, but it sounds like that's what we kind of want.
Yep.
Okay. I'm checking in with the group. We have many pages to go on the policy. Trustee Menta wanted to definitely have time to talk about the section of the memo about
Well,
volunteer
because
committees.
there is a meeting later
Yeah.
this
Right.
week.
So should we take a break from the policy review?
Yes.
Yeah.
And address that? So let's do that. So, does everybody know where we're back at? We're back at the memo for this evening.
I know, okay.
And there is a section, next steps for volunteer committees.
Okay.
And, trustee Menta, why don't you start this up, and then if other people have
Mhm.
similar or different.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of us have talked about prioritization in general. What do people think about, because this is kind of assuming that we're gonna go forward with the same.
I didn't read it that way.
Well, at least for the committees. So that was my one concern, is that we haven't really discussed amongst ourselves about how we want to handle prioritization this year. The second was, the staff can, in the middle of the second paragraph, for staff to meet or converse with committee chair, confirm the feasibility of initiatives, suggest modifications to the prioritization if the proposal is unfeasible. So I guess my concern here is that, where's the board in this? Because the decision's being made with staff and, the committee, like staff could say to conservation, well, you may wanna do, fish and feather and electric vehicles, but, staff could say, no, we don't wanna do that, and, where do we as a board have any, input into, that decision, or do we, maybe we don't, but I would like to have some ability to have some input into it. And then the committees continue basically without staff support. That's kind of a big decision, because like some committees have money that they want to budget and spend on different things, and how would they go about doing that? I think committees, I really value committees. Some of them give us like really expert opinions on things, and I feel a little bit like it's, and I don't know how we would do this with like Plan Commission and DRB. I mean, they need to have somebody there, Board of Review and Board of Appeals. So I mean, really, we're only talking about what parks, Pen, Bike, and Conservation, HRC, right? I mean, we're gonna have, Bart's still gonna go to Plan, and DRB, and Board of Appeals, and Board of Review, and CDA has 3 staff members that go to it.
Yeah.
I still have to do board of review and board of appeals.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know why we need to have, but whatever, that's Rebecca's decision, who goes where. But, I mean, we're really talking about those 4 that do not have staff support, and I just think it's a big decision.
And so you would like more time to.
Well, I don't know what other people think.
I agree.
Well, could I jump in and just say one thing? I don't think that it was the intention to not provide staff support at all. So for those items like board of review and plan commission that, you know, have those statutory functions that they need to proceed with, it's the presumption that they will be staffed at every meeting. But for some of the other meetings, and the, Tyler, you correct me, jump in when I'm wrong, Parks Commission, Conservation, Public Art,
Pet and bike.
Pet and Bike, thank you.
And HRC.
And HRC, that the staff support would be provided quarterly for those business meetings. Because many of the things that they work on don't necessarily require staff support to be there at every meeting. So we still have a desire. We feel, you know, the volunteer committees are very important. They do a lot of wonderful things for the community. So we want them to continue. It's just that the need for that to occur on a monthly basis isn't necessary.
I just feel like the Parks Commission, it's just kind of dead in the water. I mean, and then if you don't have any staff, it's like, what are our initiatives in parks? I mean, what the Parks Commission should be working on stuff. They are a commission, and it's like, I don't know. I think we're kind of abandoning these committees, and they've done a lot of good work in a lot of initiatives, and I understand that staff time's a bit, but, and I'm a little concerned about, we're back into prioritization. That was a lot of time spent, and a lot of frustration. We just completed the last round and didn't do hardly any of the things they recommended, so I'm not sure why we go back at them again with the list.
I also wanted to second Trustee Menta's first point. I agree with everything that's been said on staff, but, you know, for staff to come out and say a proposal isn't feasible, where does it leave the board? I mean, maybe it's as simple as, you know, what do you mean by isn't feasible? Do you mean something that's just so high in the sky that there's no way, it doesn't even need to be brought to the board? But that seems to give seems to take the board completely out if staff is deciding, you know, this is feasible, this is not feasible. It seems to take it out of our hands completely. So I think we need to have a role somewhere in there. And maybe it's about where you draw that line, but I agree with Trustee Menta's point.
I would want to make sure though that, I mean, the staff, I hear what you're saying, because you don't want something to just be shut down at the staff level, but we also have to, I guess part of the proposal would be like, it would take us this amount of staff hours, more or less, you know, and I mean. Or funding, and then it's a funding issue, it would be on us. If it's a staff time, then we have to realize that, you know, they're gonna have to reallocate some of the other stuff that they're doing, or those hours for this. But I hear what you're saying, we don't want things just to be shut down, or we would at least some sort of communication as to why the staff doesn't feel it's feasible, right?
Yeah, maybe it's something where you figure out where that line is. I mean, I don't know where it is offhand, but maybe we just put more definition around that.
Well, where does this leave you? Because we're at 7:30, so, and this is really something that I think does need more discussion, if you want the board to support you. It doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, we're happy to bring it back for another meeting.
Okay.
Well, how, the prioritization stuff with us meeting with the chairs on Thursday.
Right.
Well, it hasn't been decided from this group, so they won't really you know, that part won't proceed.
Okay.
Are we talking about a board prioritization, like our priorities, or, theirs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, some of this is fine, like the role of the chair, role of staff and liaisons. And we did have one meeting with all the chairs together, which they found really valuable. I don't know if anything came out of it, but, and so I mean, some of the items that we were planning to talk to them are fine, but, I agree. I'm not sure that there will be that much that has changed. I mean, I think maybe if they're just no changes from last year, you know, because they're probably pretty similar to, because we were talking about that in the fall, right? when were we doing that? It was in the fall or August?
Yeah, they did the
Last summer.
work last June,
Mhm.
so, yeah.
So the timeline has moved up to accommodate for additional time. So that time is
Yeah.
shortly approaching. So.
Yeah, that happens.
So I know, can you believe it's gonna be March?
It's February 19th.
I mean, I thought it was valuable to get the input from the committees and for us to see it and see
Yeah.
what they were interested in, and for there to be like a feedback process between us and them as to what we valued it. I mean, so I mean, I see that as like a separate thing from anyway, but I wouldn't want to take us completely out of that picture.
Yeah.
And I also think that, I mean, a lot of things in, you know, in the parks plan and stuff that's left is either engineering, you know, it really isn't feasible, or funding wise, the money, it's not in the long range plan, so it would take a real shift. Part, which is not out of the question, but that's sort of the purpose of talking about it, to see if that's the will of the board to make that type of shift. So I'm not sure, again, it seems like that does need to happen. So what I'm hearing is that the board wants to weigh in, they wanna make sure that they're not missing out on an opportunity to, you know, support something that they weren't aware of, just because they're not going to these meetings all the time. So we wanna create that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if on the 21st it would be helpful to to talk to the chairs about if we did move to a quarterly staff support meeting, how would you work with that?
Mhm.
You know, could you make use of those and get the input from them
Yep.
before we say that it won't work?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So
Sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah.
motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, it better be quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean.
You're in the attack zone.
I know.